Hey guys, Dwayne here. I want to talk today about the different phases that we go through with our children during this process. There's been a lot of questions and comments and direct email questions lately about how to deal with different situations with your kids when you're going through this. One of the things I think is a little complicated is, where I'm at right now is a very stable situation with my kids. I have a really good relationship with all three of my kids. We communicate really well. And, if you're looking at my situation from this snapshot in time, it seems real easy. Well, the problem is that's really not the case. This has been a long, painful process that has taken a lot of time to get to this point, and I've had to make a lot of transitions and changes in myself to be able to get where I am today. Okay, the problem early on with this, and I mentioned this in other videos, is that my relationship, I always had a fairly decent relationship with the kids, but I was the authoritarian, I was the disciplinarian. So when this whole thing started, I was already at a significant disadvantage because that dynamic had already been established. The kids, especially my middle daughter, had already become accustomed to using that issue to gain favor with her mom, and that just continued when the divorce happened and when things started going south. The kids would tell their mom everything, and then they would embellish, or she would embellish it with her attorney to try to make it significant contributing factors to try to force custody changes and limit the time I would have with the kids. And ultimately she was trying to get a move out of the state with the children. Now, obviously I was able to fight that, but just that victory of, the initial victory, well, first the initial victory of her not establishing 80-20, with me getting more time until it ultimately ended up with 50-50, yes, that was a victory, but that didn't solve all the problems, right? The relationship was already strained, if you want to call it that, with the kids, and she was focusing on that and stoking that fire, so to speak, to keep that thought process going. Now that resulted in a lot of complication. One, it made interactions or the relationships with all the kids very tense and troublesome. And I had to take a step back and readjust how I interacted with the kids. One, I didn't want to be that person anymore. So even prior to the marriage stopping, I had backed off on that role because it wasn't really what I wanted to do anymore. And whenever I had my own place, I was trying to establish a chaos-free environment and try to restart the interaction and communications that I had with my kids. Now, the problem with that is that they were already laying most of the blame on this situation with myself, and as such, every time they would come over, there would be this, which I've called before, a Groundhog Day effect, where I would have to restart basically transitioning them to my house. Now, initially what would happen is whenever they would come in and they wouldn't abide by the rules or how things were done here, then there would be, I kind of took the initial approach of, strict penalties, if, this is the way it is, and if you don't abide by the rules, then there's a consequence to set boundaries. Now, what I learned early on with this is that was a very ineffective way to deal with things. For one, when the kids first came over, they were already stressed and tense, and their anxiety level and stress level was already increased, which also caused them to basically push my buttons. Not necessarily that, I don't necessarily believe that the ex was sitting there saying, okay, push these buttons. I think it was just the overall stress of the situation coming into, switching environments, and then me responding in that way made what it would do. And what it would do is it would cause a problem that would last pretty much the entire duration that they were with me. Now, what I learned early on is that if I would just basically consider that transition day a wash, unless something really egregious happened, basically just let it go, or, at the bare minimum, just say, this behavior is unacceptable. Because there's a transition day, I'll give you a pass, but this is unacceptable tomorrow. To be perfectly honest, I kind of would even recommend against that, because you want to give them a day to acclimate to your situation, your rules, and to let them, I guess, be eased back into it. Now, it's really frustrating whenever this is happening every other week. Okay, but even with this, I've had problems with every one of my kids. Fortunately, they all didn't happen at once, so that was a benefit that I'm grateful for. But it was frustrating that every time I finished with one, another problem would happen with a different one. So this has been an ongoing thing for the last 4.5 years. I mean, it's really calmed down now. I mean, right now I'm dealing with issues with my youngest with school and stuff, but I've been able to take a lot of the things I learned, implement that with my youngest. And even though it still has been an involved process, it has been a little bit easier, and I think I've dealt with it just a little bit better. Bottom line is, the main key on a lot of this is establishing good communication and trust with your child. Now, if that's been undermined and you don't have that, it's really hard to rebuild it. It can be rebuilt, but it takes longer. Think of it like if you let your weight get out of control. This situation is very similar, and I'm not saying that to demoralize you. What I'm saying it more of in the effect to say that you can make a change, right? I mean, even on the weight thing, at any point you can decide to start making healthy changes. And as long as you continue to work at it, you have a strong possibility of success of achieving the goal that you're trying to get. I think the same is very true with your kids. Now, if you're, the more damaged your relationship gets, the harder it's going to be to repair. But I think if you can persevere with it and implement some of the things I'm talking about, that it'll increase your chance for success. Okay, one of the first things that I didn't really realize at first and then learned later is the absolute black and white when it pertains to your kids. You have to have some flexibility, especially with the fact that you don't have consistent time with your kids. So it's not like you're going to be able to issue a solution or a consequence and have it stay for 3 to 4 weeks. When you have a situation where every few days or every week your child is going back to the other parent and everything that you've done has been hit, the reset button has been hit, and then when they come back you have to start over, it makes it really complicated. What you have to do is you have to mix in some little breaks, right? And it's tough because a lot of times we're all conditioned to think that whenever a consequence is in effect, it's boom, it's what it is. The problem with that is if your kid knows that all they have to do is wait you out 2 or 3 days or 5 days at the most, and they can go back to their mom, and then you get in this battle of wits where you're at a stalemate. And unfortunately, they know that all they have to do is wait you out, go to the other house, and do whatever they want. So you have to find a balance. Now, what I mean by that is you find something that is, in my case, I was able to take stuff away, right? And you have that be a firm consequence, like, okay, you've done that, you're failing your classes, and until your grades go up, you lose this privilege. And they will fight you on it, and they will say, can I get it back? I did this better. They'll try to negotiate. You don't negotiate, but you stay firm on that, but you still do other things. You still find other ways to where you can interact with your child to build a relationship. Now, what I have done, I'm just off the top of my head, one of the things my youngest used to like to do, she doesn't really want to do this anymore. She would want 15 minutes. One of the therapists had recommended this thing where the kids would get 15 minutes of uninterrupted time with the parent, and they would get to choose whatever they wanted to do. So if they wanted to play dollies, you play dollies. If they want to play make-believe, you do that. If they want to, sing songs, whatever it is, that's what you would do. And, so I would do that. It's like, okay, so we would, there was these other consequences. Obviously, if she goes, well, I want to play with the thing that, with you that you've been taken away, that's obviously not on the table. But bottom line is you have to find ways to where you can actually connect with your child and build your relationship. Bottom line is positive attention goes a long way with that. Now, I will tell you, it is really tough whenever they're pushing all your buttons and they're driving you crazy. But like I said at the beginning of this video, it's a very difficult process. Like I said at the beginning, I'm at the 4.5 year mark and things are going really well, but it was a nightmare the first few years into it. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm trying to remember, last year wasn't so bad with my youngest, but the year prior, even with the homework, it was a knockdown drag out. And it was a combination of things. It was twofold. It was, you're going to take a shower every day. And every time, it would be, I don't want to take a shower. I took a shower the other day, or first it was mommy doesn't make me take a shower every day, so I shouldn't have to take a shower here. And I'm like, no, you're taking it, you just set firm boundaries. You're going to do it. Then it's well, I just took one yesterday. Why do I take one today? Because you take one every day. But those fights diminished over time. I was firm. I didn't get mad about it. Okay, maybe a few times in the beginning I did, but once I started to relax about this and was able to stay calmer, then she actually got calmer, because part of it is they're trying to push your buttons, and if you're not reacting and they're not getting that reaction, then it loses its allure because it's not accomplishing anything. The big thing about all of this is you really are going to have to learn how to take a figurative punch to the face on a reoccurring basis. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to get a thick skin, so whenever your kids basically poke you in the eye or punch you, that you can take it, not react emotionally to it, and it is tough. Let me just pause there for a moment and say, this wasn't easy for me. And I'm saying this now, but there were times, especially with the older two, where when they would do that, when they would basically effectively punch me in the face, I would react. I would react negatively, and nothing good came from that. It amplified the situation. It made it worse, and it took longer for it to calm down. But I get it, guys. It is. Do not think that I, on day one of this, was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, for you folks out there that can remember that, and was just calm and collected, and everything was just great, and I did everything right. I didn't. It was a very complicated process. One of the key components of that is when these things are happening, it's basically a trigger for the experiences you've had with your ex and the current experience you're having with them, because that a lot of this drama is created directly from the ex and what they're doing and how they're interacting with the kids. The thing is, you have to learn to keep that in check and not allow yourself to get really angry and respond on that, because it doesn't accomplish anything. And effectively, your kids are pawns in this, and they're basically being used. Another thing that I think is important to remember is that they're confused on all this, and they don't know who really to trust. And in some ways, they're in their mind are thinking that they understand who and what you are. And what I mean by that is, Daddy always gets mad and he always responds negatively, and that's the way it is. So I'm going to prove it to myself, because I'm going to push his buttons and he's going to get angry, and it'll validate what I think. In a lot of ways, it's like the gray rock technique that you use. Whenever they're not able to get a response from you, then it causes them to question what's going on. And when you can do that, and you can do that over time, it calms them down. But it's really tough, and it's not easy. And if this is degraded to the point where your child is absolutely in a battle of wits with you, it is going to take a tremendous amount of perseverance on your part to reestablish that communication and the relationship you have with your child. Now, the key thing to remember on this is, especially if right now you have reoccurring persistent contact with your kids, then you are in a significant advantage, because you have time to try to work this to make it happen. Bottom line is, you need to take a step back and reapproach your interactions with your child. And if whatever you've been doing so far isn't working, then you have to recognize that it's not working, and pause, take a time out, and take an objective look at your situation and think, how can you adjust this to work better? If something's not working right now, then you might as well take a pause and try something different to see if you can achieve better results. Bottom line, the first step with that is trying to establish some type of communication to really get your child to tell you how they're feeling, what they're thinking. Don't respond to it. Stop and listen. Give them the opportunity to talk to you, and not, immediately try to defend yourself or tell them why they're wrong or whatever, because you really need to understand where they're coming from, what their motivations are, and how you can do it. A good example of that, one of the things I have done with my kids is, the old trick, I guess if you want to call it that, where you say, okay, you've done something wrong. What do you think an appropriate punishment is? And have them say, okay, well, I think this. These are all different ideas to try. You may have already tried some of these. You may not have, or maybe you need to reevaluate it. But bottom line is I think the key on this is you have to find a middle ground, a gray area, where you can still establish boundaries and consequences, but give yourself the opportunity to continue to work on your relationship with your kids. Otherwise, what happens is you end up being the bad guy, and it's always a nightmare at dad's house or mom's house, whoever, whatever side you're on this, and it puts you at a significant disadvantage in trying to deal with this. And guys, I've gone through this. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up. If you have some experience where you've been successful in this, leave comments below. I've been talking with a lot of people offline and some comments online about this. I hope this video provides some thoughts on how you can approach this and maybe try to change the dynamic or change the tide in your own household. If that is the case, if you want to leave some comments on that, please do that. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If the channel's helping you, please subscribe. And if you know someone who is dealing with this exact problem and you think it could help them, share it with them, because the biggest key on this is figuring out your approach as quickly as possible to modify it. Bottom line, guys, I lost probably 2 years of time that set me back because I was not doing what I needed to do. I was doing it wrong, and I was still making progress, but it was really slow, methodical, painful progress. All right, on that, I'll wrap this video up, and I will talk to you guys on the next one. Take care. Bye.